CS. In the joke, it is Jaroslav who expounds a musicological theory, so the hypothetical nature of the reflection is clear. But there are passages in your novels where you yourself speak out directly. Kundera. Even if I'm the one speaking, my reflections are connected to a character. I want to think his attitudes, his way of seeing things, in his stead and more deeply than he could do it himself. Part 2 of The Unbearable Lightness of Being begins with a long meditation on the interrelations between the body and the soul. Yes, it is the author speaking, but everything he says is valid only within the magnetic field of character. Teresa. It is Teresa's way of seeing things, though never formulated by her. CS. But often your meditations are not linked to any character. The musicological passages in the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, or your thoughts on the death of Stalin's son in The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Kundera. That's true. From time to time, I like to intervene directly as author, as myself. In that case, tone is crucial. From the very first word, my thoughts have a tone that is playful, ironic, provocative, experimental, or inquiring. The entire 6th part of The Unbearable Lightness of Being, the Grand March, is an essay on kitsch, whose main thesis is, kitsch is the absolute denial of shit. All of that meditation on kitsch is vitally important for me. There is a great deal of reflection, experience, study, even passion behind it. But the tone is never serious, it is provocative. That essay is unthinkable outside the novel. It is what I mean by a specifically novelistic essay. CS. You've spoken of novelistic counterpoint as uniting philosophy, narrative, and dream. Let's consider dream. Oniric narrative takes up all of part 2 of Life is Elsewhere. It's the basis of part 6 of the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, and it runs through The Unbearable Lightness of Being by way of Teresa's dreams. Kundera. Oniric narrative, let's say rather imagination freed from the control of reason and from concern for verisimilitude, ventures into landscapes inaccessible to rational thought. The dream is only the model for the sort of imagination that I consider the greatest discovery of modern art. But how can uncontrolled imagination be integrated into the novel, which by definition is supposed to be a lucid examination of existence? How can such disparate elements be united? That calls for a real alchemy. The first, I believe, to think of this alchemy was Novalis. He interpolated 3 dreams into his novel Heinrich von Ofterdingen. This was no realistic imitation of dreams, of the sort we find in Tolstoy or Mann. It was a great piece of poetry inspired by the imaginative technique that is a property of dream. But he wasn't satisfied. Those 3 dreams, he felt, occurred like islands within the novel. He therefore wanted to go further and write the 2nd volume of the novel as a narration in which dream and reality are bound together, so fully mingled that one cannot be distinguished from the other. But he never wrote that 2nd volume. All we have are some notes describing his aesthetic project. It was realized 120 years later by Franz Kafka, whose novels are that seamless fusion of dream and reality. His novels, that supremely lucid gaze set on the modern world, along with the most unfettered imagination. Above all, Kafka represents an enormous aesthetic revolution, an artistic miracle. For instance, take that amazing chapter in The Castle where Kay makes love with Frida for the first time. Or the chapter where he turns a primary school classroom into a bedroom for himself, Frida, and the 2 assistants. Before Kafka, such density of imagination was inconceivable. It would, of course, be ridiculous to imitate him, but like Kafka and like Novalis, I feel that same desire to bring dream imagination into the novel. My own way of doing it is not by a fusion of dream and reality, but by polyphonic confrontation. The Oniric narrative is one of the elements in the counterpoint. CS, I'd like to go back to the question of unity in a composition. You've described the Book of Laughter and Forgetting as a novel in variation form. Then is it still a novel? Kundera, what keeps it from looking like one is that there is no unity of action. It is hard to imagine a novel without that unity. Even the Nouveau Roman experiments were grounded in a unity of action or of inaction. Sterne and Diderot took pleasure in making that unity extremely fragile. Jacques' journey with his master makes up the smaller part of Diderot's novel. It is a mere comic pretext, a box to hold an array of anecdotes, stories, reflections. Nonetheless, this pretext, this box, is needed to give the book the feel of a novel, or at least a parody of a novel. However, I believe there is something deeper that guarantees a novel's coherence, thematic unity, and this was always true, by the way. The three narrative lines of The Possessed are bound together by storytelling technique, yes, but above all by their common theme, the demons that take possession of man when he loses God. In each of the narrative lines, this theme is considered from a different angle, like a thing reflected in three mirrors. And it's this thing, this abstract thing I call the theme, that gives the novel as a whole an internal coherence, the least visible and the most important kind. In the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, the coherence of the whole is created solely by the unity of a few themes and motifs, which are developed in variations. Is it a novel? Yes, to my mind. The novel is a meditation on existence as seen through the medium of imaginary characters. CS. By that broad a definition, we could even call the Decameron a novel. All of its stories are connected by the same theme of love and told by the same 10 narrators. Kundera. I won't be so provocative as to call the Decameron a novel. Still, that book is one of the first efforts in modern Europe to create a large-scale composition in narrative prose, and as such, it has a place in the history of the novel, at least as its source and forerunner. You know, the novel took the particular historical path it took. It could just as easily have taken a completely different one. The novel form is almost boundless freedom. Throughout its history, the novel hasn't taken much advantage of that. It has missed out on that freedom. It has left unexplored many formal possibilities. CS. Still, except for the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, your own novels too are based on a unity of action, if of a rather loose sort. Kundera. I've always constructed them on two levels. On the first, I compose the novel's story. Over that, I develop the themes. The themes are worked out steadily within and by the story. Whenever a novel abandons its themes and settles for just telling the story, it goes flat. A theme, on the other hand, can be developed on its own, outside the story. That approach to theme I call digression. Digression means abandoning the story for a moment. All of the reflection on kitsch in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, for example, is a digression. I leave off telling the novel's story to go at my theme, kitsch, directly. Considered from that viewpoint, digression enhances the discipline of the composition rather than weakening it. I make a distinction between theme and motif. Motif is an element of the theme or of the story that appears several times over the course of the novel, always in a different context. For instance, the motif of the Beethoven quartet that moves from Therese's life into Thomas' thoughts and runs through the various themes as well, the theme of weight, the kitsch theme, or the motif of Sabina's bowler hat, which appears in the Sabina Thomas, Sabina Teresa, and Sabina Franz scenes, and which also illustrates the words misunderstood theme. CS. But what exactly do you mean by the word theme? Kundera. A theme is an existential inquiry. And increasingly I realize that such an inquiry is finally the examination of certain words, theme words. Which leads me to emphasize a novel is based primarily on certain fundamental words. It is like Schoenberg's tone row. In the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, the row goes forgetting, laughter, angels, litost, border. Over the course of the novel, those 5 principal words are analyzed, studied, defined, redefined, and thus transformed into categories of existence. The novel is built on those few categories the way a house is built on its pillars. The pillars of The Unbearable Lightness of Being: weight, lightness, soul, body, the grand march, shit, kitsch, compassion, vertigo, strength, weakness. CS. Let's talk about the architectonic plan of your novels. All but one of them are divided into 7 parts. Kundera. When I finished The Joke, I had no reason to be surprised that it had 7 parts. Then I wrote Life is Elsewhere. The book was almost done and it had 6 parts. I wasn't satisfied with it. The story seemed flat. Suddenly it occurred to me to put in a story that would take place 3 years after the hero's death, that is, beyond the time frame of the novel. It became the next to last part, the 6th. Quote, the middle-aged man, end of quote. Instantly the whole thing seemed right. Later on I realized that this 6th part was a strange parallel to part 6 of The Joke, Kostka, which also brings an outside person into the novel, opens a secret window through the novel's wall. Laughable Loves began as 10 stories. When I was putting it in final form, I eliminated 3 of them and the whole thing became very coherent in a way that prefigured the Book of Laughter and Forgetting. The same themes, especially the hoax, make a single entity out of 7 narratives, the 4th and 6th of which are further linked by having the same protagonist, Dr. Havel. In the Book of Laughter and Forgetting, too, the 4th and 6th parts are linked by the same character, Tamina. When I wrote The Unbearable Lightness of Being, I was determined to break the spell of the number 7. The novel had long been conceived as a 6-part structure, but the first still seemed shapeless. Finally, I realized that it was really 2 parts, that it was like Siamese twins needing to be separated by delicate surgery. My point is that the 7-part structure doesn't represent some superstitious flirtation with magical numbers or any rational calculation, but a deep, unconscious, incomprehensible drive, an archetype of form that I cannot escape. My novels are variants of an architecture based on the number 7.